Sean, another NFL Combine. Which positions seem to be the strength of this draft for you?
Oh, that's a good question. Look, after doing the front board meeting, certainly it's a deep draft at receiver. We think a defensive back as well, and defensive line. And anytime I say that, there's certainly a lot of talent at the other positions. But if you said what stood out, in our meetings here last month, it would have been those positions.
I know you guys have your musts and needs and wants list.
Yeah.
And without trying to tell who the musts are or what the must is, are those categories fillable through the draft?
Yeah, and look, some of them, let's say you have a player, Drew Brees, and you don't know if he's returning or not. Whenever you enter the end of a season, if a player's a free agent, even though he was on your team, you remove him off your depth chart so you can examine where your depth chart is with the current players that are on your roster signed. So when you take David Onyemata off, and then when you take a Drew Brees off and a Teddy Bridgewater off, so sometimes your musts are players like Drew Brees or David Onyemata or the equivalent. And so you have to do that exercise with your own roster removed that are free agents. And so that can be a little daunting at first, but it really narrows your focus as to the places you need to fill. And so where do you do that? You do that either signing your own players, signing other free agents, and then, of course, through the draft.
Speaking of Drew, does the fluid CBA, does that make it, or does that change anything for you in terms of free agency?
I think everyone's paying attention to that because, look, it can impact. There are a handful of things it can impact. Obviously, the amount of money you're working with, which would be the cap, and then there are a few nuances that will possibly change if an agreement is reached. So all of us will adjust very quickly if that happens, and if it doesn't, we'll stay the course.
Does it kind of slow you down in terms of, I guess, how aggressive you can be early because you don't necessarily know?
I don't think so. I think that we'll have a pretty good idea before the start of the league year as to where that sits. And I think, look, both sides are trying to sort through that, and hopefully sooner than later we'll figure it out.
You said nuance. That's a good word for this combine because there are some nuances to this combine.
Man, with a capital N, huh?
Just how are you adjusting to them?
The schedule is good. It's our nocturnal combine. It's a little different. Look, we basically are interviewing players in the AM and we're working players out in the PM rather than the 20-some other years in the past. And I'm sure there's some things that we're going to have to tweak after this year, and we'll get figured out. But we'll be here most of the evening here tonight watching players work out.
Are the drill additions, subtractions to your liking, or?
Yeah, they've been fine. I mean, there's some standard things you want to be able to record because that gives you a comparison relative to the last 25 years. And then some of the drill work on the field that's been added or removed, I think that's been just fine.
When you have as many free agents, restricted and unrestricted, as you do, how do you kind of figure out or parse through, okay, this is a guy we want to get back, this is a guy?
Yeah, that's a difficult question. I think there's two elements to it. Obviously, you'd love to have all of these guys back, and then at what cost? Because sometimes a player may have to go to we don't say the market, to go into free agency and actually see what the other 31 teams or how the other 31 teams value him to get a price. There's certain players that the player himself and the club themselves may not fully understand what the number is going to be. And so the market, which would be the other clubs bidding on a player, can quickly settle or create a price. But it's not an exact science, and it's something you spend a lot of time on.
Yep. Going into the draft, I think you guys have 5 picks. Do you see 5 Saints players?
Oh, listen, I think that we'd like to think so. And there's nothing to say that 5 can't be 6 as you get closer relative to where you're picking and whether you want to make any trades. But, last year I was real pleased with, and we were all real pleased with what we were able to do with some of the ammo we had a year ago and really bring in a number of players that helped us. You know, a couple undrafted players. Obviously, Deontay is a returner, and then Shai Tuttle, who played a lot for us on the defensive line. Eric and Chauncey. I mean, we felt like we had a real good draft without maybe the full allotment of picks. This year, I think we'll have plenty of those opportunities again.